The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Tuesday, October 9th, Wednesday, October 10th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, broadcasting to you live from the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, right here at SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network and Deep Talk Radio, and we say hello to each and every one of you. You want to check out our archives, guess what? They are all free for you at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. The only thing I ask in return is hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Tonight's show is brought to you by the YouTube channel Ensuho. Sebastian Martin brings high-quality messages to the masses. Go to spacedoutradio.com, click on the Ensuho banner, and subscribe to the channel today. The northern tip of Long Island, New York, is a land full of military and mystery. Christopher Garetano took the lead to the film in the 2015 documentary, The Montauk Chronicles, detailing the weird and strange events that surrounded the now-closed base, Camp Hero Air Force Base. Christopher is the owner and president of White Phosphorus Pictures, LLC, and for over a decade of study into the dark conspiracy, he also checks out paranormal legends such as Bigfoot. This is going to be a very interesting show, because the Montauk story just will not go away. What really happened there? Was there ties to the Philadelphia experiment, MKUltra, other weird, strange, anomalous programs? We will find out momentarily. Then in the bottom of hour number 3, Olaf Phillips will be back with the latest edition of The Encounter from our SOR newsroom in Paranoia Magazine. Mr. Christopher Garetano, it's been a couple of years since we've had you on Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
It's always a pleasure to have you on and to have an opportunity to chat with you. What have you been up to? What have you been working on?
Oh, wow. Well, see, after Montauk Chronicles, we made the Dark Files for the History Channel. So it was an investigative follow-up to my character study, my docudrama, and I was very happy with it. And in the end, it was a big collaboration, but I was quite happy with it, and I feel like for the first time, something significant was found in terms of evidence, because for a while it was really, in my opinion, it was a very biased tale. It was only coming from the men who conjured up the legend, at least as far as we knew, and there was never anyone else outside to corroborate this incredible underground facility and this government program outside of, 4 gentlemen and a publisher. So I feel like we made a lot of progress over the years. I started this investigation well over a decade ago, and I wanted to start fresh. I talked to so many people over the years that have ingested this legend and all of the things that come with it, but they still seem to only get it from the biased source, and you have to look outside of that, and you have to be objective, and you have to actually be immersed in the material yourself. And this is outside of the internet and outside of some of the biased manuals that were written. So we spent a lot of time doing that, and I was very happy with that. So in the meantime, I've been writing, this my take on what I feel is an oversaturated subject on the North American Sasquatch, the Bigfoot legend. And I have a very unique perspective on it. However, I feel like it's the best perspective, and it has been revealed in books over the years, and it was done right, but very little of it was portrayed correctly in motion picture and in television. So I'm writing the ultimate Bigfoot movie. Outside of that, I am working on, I just got greenlit a new network show that I can't say the network just yet, but it will be premiering next year. We're going into pre-production shortly, and I'm so excited for it. And every episode is different. However, it's covering a bizarre tale or a mystery or a strange happening or a strange culture that I've been interested in for years. The show is initially of my own design, and now it's a collaboration with myself and the network and a co-production. So I'm just so excited to get to work on that. And I'm also directing an episode of a new horror anthology show that's being produced by Sam Raimi and Jeffrey Katzenberg. So it's another exciting thing that I'm working on. My plate is full right now. I've got nothing to complain about. All these dreams are coming true. So I'm happy to chat about anything you want to tonight.
How did you get into the entire conspiracy theory section? Were you always someone who had an interest in this, or were you tipped off to something that you had learned, and maybe it's just the story, maybe it's the creativity inside of you as a movie maker?
I was always, I think initially my first inspiration were bizarre legends, strange occurrences, unsolved mysteries, paranormal stories. The whole conspiratorial thing, though, did not come about until I started burying myself into the Montauk tales. But I think, there was this book called I believe it's The Golden Book of the Mysterious. And there was an illustrator named Alan Lee. He was a Tolkien illustrator. And those drawings, that book came out in 1976. I got my hands on it probably by 1981. I was a little kid, and I was just blown away by the imagery. I just focused on it every day. These illustrations by Alan Lee, everything from, the abominable snowman to UFOs to the original perspective on Men in Black, which was quite a terrifying idea, the way they were originally portrayed before the Sonnenfeld movie. So it was all of that imagery drawn by Alan Lee that I think inspired me before even watching, horror films. I started with Universal horror films and then moved my way through that to, whatever was popular during the 70s and 80s. But those illustrations were definitely the seminal thing that inspired me to do all this.
Was it something that in the back of your mind you felt needed to come out, that there wasn't proper information about the Montauk Project and everything that kind of happened there at the military base back in its day when it was running? Or was it something that you just felt needed to be done for the sake of telling a really cool tale?
All of the above. Listen, when I started, nobody was really covering it. There were a few. I started in 2006, so there were a few little website thingies here and there, but it was really just a regurgitation of what Alfred Bielek and what Preston Nichols had already talked about. Now, Art Bell talked to both of them in the 90s, and I heard those original Coast to Coast AM shows, and I remember that. And those were much more compelling to me than the book. The initial book that was written was very short. If anybody has their hands on it, it's a very short book. It's almost like a pamphlet or something. And there wasn't much to it, and there certainly wasn't a lot on the Montauk Boys program as a brutal conspiracy, is what we've learned since then. So when I started, there wasn't much on it, and I wanted to separate myself from, let's say, the cult of people who just reveled in the material that was available, the very limited material. And I wanted to go out and start fresh and create a new available resource of information. And over a 10-year period, you go through many evolutions. I went from being very doubtful of it, then sitting personally with Al Bielek. I sat with him personally. I visited Preston Nichols personally. Like all these people, I went to these places as opposed to just reading a few log lines on the internet or a book. And, I wanted to immerse myself in it. So I kept going and going deeper and asking more questions and going back. And it took a long period of time, went through many evolutions. And then when I came across material for MKUltra and alike mind control experiments, I started to realize the possibilities in this, because I was doubtful of it because of all of the things that were comparable to everything that was fantastic growing up. Most of the things that Preston and Al were talking about were almost identical to things that I saw in science fiction growing up, or everything from The Outer Limits to The Twilight Zone to Fantastic Planet. Forbidden Planet. Fantastic Planet was the animated French film. But, there were little things here and there that it felt like they were cherry picking and creating this story with. It wasn't until the elements of the Montauk Boys were further elaborated upon by Al and Preston personally when I talked to them that I realized, hey, wait a second here. So we're talking about drug-induced hallucinations mixed with boys being kidnapped. This is a very odd legend. It stood out from every other paranormal legend that I ever experienced because of that program of human subjects being kidnapped, brutalized in every which way you could think of, horribly. This is not something we should enjoy reading about, but a lot of people were to start. And so it led me to believe that I think, and I'm being generous here, that a lot of the fantastic elements that were being talked about could very well have been part of the ruse on the part of the government, where a lot of the people that were involved may have hallucinated. Some of this stuff may have been staged for them. Now, I'm not saying that bizarre and extraordinary things don't happen. I'm just saying in this case it makes sense that a lot of those things would be staged in case a witness were to survive and later explain this to someone who is not in the conspiracy world as a hobby, and might reveal that there were crimes committed. And so these are things that happened and unfolded over time. And it, now all of this information is available to you between my two programs, the movie and the television program, and all the further essays that have been written and interviews and everything. But at the time, those things didn't exist. We had to discover these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see that, and we're going to get into some of the major players like Al and Preston, who just passed away a couple of days ago, in regards to learning about all this. What did you know about the Montauk Project before you started getting into the depths of your research?
I knew what everybody else knew from listening to everyone else that was interested, because again, this is very obscure mystery at the time. Now there's a big cult following, especially since, my movies came out and Stranger Things and all that stuff brought a lot of attention to this type of conspiracy. It's huge right now. It's really spilled over into the mainstream in so many ways too. And it's scary because a lot of this stuff is true, we've discovered, or possibly true. And so, but at the time, I only knew what everyone else knew. I knew the few kind of limited things that were being discussed in the first Montauk book, and the furthering of that when Art Bell had his 2 episodes. And I didn't really believe these guys to start, but I was respectful, as always, just going in very respectfully. I was more interested in hearing Al tell me these things in person than what was already said, So it was like I was there. I wanted to see this elderly man with the greatest respect, just sit with him at his home and have him tell me some stories and just see for myself and see where to go next. It was a very organic process. I had ideas on how I wanted to illustrate things creatively as a filmmaker, but making a movie like this, you really have to keep it open and let yourself change things as you go. And I did. I made 2 movies, one of which only very few people saw between late 2011 and throughout 2012. And I remade the whole thing all over again in 2013, finished in late 2014, put it out in 2015.
I got to ask you, how did you get the trust of these guys in order to do the documentary? Because you're going into a lot of personal life stories and a lot of personal tales, Chris.
I was honest about who I was, who I am. I was kind. I did not walk in with some kind of stuffy attitude like I'm a film producer and you should worship me and blah, 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 like I've seen people do, and it's just egotistical, garbage. So I just went in there and said, hey, man, I'm making this thing. I promised to be honest with you. I promised to show you the final cut before I put it out. If you're uncomfortable with something, it's the promise I made to everybody. We can debate about taking it out for sure. I will not make you look like an idiot. And again, as editors know, and I'm an editor for 20 plus years, you can take anything, any interview with any person and make them look bad. Even if they're the just most wonderful person on the planet, you can, as an editor, if you're good, you can make them look bad. Now, I did my best to portray them obviously in an abridged version, because you shoot hundreds of hours when you do this stuff, as I saw them, as from this honest perspective. So you don't bring in people to make them feel uncomfortable. You don't walk into their home and pretend like it's yours. You go in there, you shake their hand, maybe bring them breakfast, bring them lunch, be honest with them, and let's just talk like we're friends. Like, I want to know about your story. Show them respect. And I think that's how, over time, and in some cases instantaneously, I won their trust, and we got, I think, the best interviews that I've ever seen with these guys. And they wouldn't argue with that. I know. I have the most genuine interview with Al that I've ever seen, most genuine interviews with Preston and anybody else that participated. I think it was their most honest moments, even though some of them might have elaborated a little bit. Still, there was honesty in their demeanor, in their voice inflection, in their presentation, and their portrait, I felt, was the most honest I've ever seen any of these guys.
Mm-hmm. And when you were interviewing them, how did you want to tell their story? Did you want to elaborate that? Did you want them to go in real in depth, or was it about, maybe taking it a step further than they normally have on radio shows or other documentaries? How did you want it to sound and to film?
Okay, I knew exactly where I wanted to go, and then as you feel it, as you go along, you go with that organic process, and you continue to open up these energetic windows and go through and bring that information through. So, in other words, I listened to the way Art Bell interviewed them, and he just allowed people to speak. In my case, I would listen to details that I would suspect that a normal person who is into this stuff would overlook, because a person who is part of just the cult of wanting to believe this stuff from the get-go without any evidence, without any experience, personal experience, except just reading their books and trusting them because they're nice or trusting them because whatever they want to believe, I would go through not being rude, because there's a way to remain objective without being rude, and just listen for honest moments, listen for things, and then base new questions off of that. And I think that's how I discovered emotional things. I talked about their childhoods. I talked about what they did for work before they went in. These are questions usually the cult of interest doesn't ask, because the cult of interest is already sold on it. And so they're just being idiosyncratic. In other words, they're asking about the technologies they have no example of. They're asking about aliens they don't know exist. And so they're just supporting the story. And I think a great investigator needs to challenge the story, but without, being a jerk. So the way you challenge it is just, please explain for us that we don't believe 100%. Can you further elaborate on details? Because details are important. When you know a truth, you'll have details. I've been through some extraordinary things, through some seriously tragic things in life, and I can tell you every little detail to this moment of those incidents. So if you were part of a government program where you personally met extraterrestrials, elaborate, exotic extraterrestrials, saw brutal crimes being committed, murder, rape, everything you could think of, over many years, 13-year period, it's safe to assume, and most people with a working brain would agree, that you would have a variety of details, perhaps enough to fill an encyclopedia, and a volume of encyclopedias. So if your story is really thin and you don't have any legit excuse for that, I would lean towards the fact that you might be lying, or you're not a very good liar. So.
How did you believe their stories, though? I mean, because if you go in with a skeptical mind, even if it's open, there's going to be stories and tales that they tell that you're like, come on, this really didn't happen.
I said, come on, this really didn't happen thousands of times. Now, everybody is different in this tale. You have to understand that you have Al Bielek, Duncan Cameron, Preston Nichols, and who came in later was Stuart Swerdlow. All of these guys came in different times, and then later on, they got together, and then their publisher came in, who worked with Preston on the first book. And let's think about business for a second, because a book was made, a price tag was put on it, and it was sold. So at some point, these gentlemen all got in a room together, who knows, over a bottle of wine, case of beer, whatever, over dinner, and talked about putting this story together. And then they had to stick with that story that was put in the book. Now, this is the organic process of all of this, because we try to see things in black and white when it comes to these mysteries, and that's just not how life works. And so I'm always looking through the visor of this organic perspective, trying to understand how things came together, listening, asking questions, and just listening to all these details, putting the puzzle pieces together, thinking about probability. What's the probability that this happened? Connecting dots. This took so much time to do. And so I wasn't always believing them, but always also looking for something genuine in people, even a genuine reaction to a lie or a questioning of perhaps something I think they're lying about, or a genuine question about something they might be really embellishing on, like it was perhaps 10% of something that, they're showing as 100%. And these things happen because they had to sit in the room with this writer-publisher and how do we put this in the context of a story? Okay, omit this, because if you look at the first book, a lot of the brutality and all of that stuff regarding the Montauk boys wasn't in it. Now, the publisher has a few explanations for that. You can believe what you want. I can believe what I want. We don't know the truth. But it wasn't in the book. And so that particular factor seems like a truth to me. One reason or another, that decision was to omit that element. And when that element came out later from everybody, makes me believe that something was covered up, some kind of crime for a reason. But I still haven't, to this day, haven't figured out why someone in the high government didn't try and stop that book early on before it spread all over the internet and everything. A lot of this is so enigmatic to me. I still, to this day, haven't figured it out. But I do know that there is something that official people in the government are certainly trying to hide over there. And I can tell you exactly why. If you saw the Dark Files, you saw some of that.
Yeah, fill us in on that, please. Fill us in.
Okay, so during the investigation for the Dark Files, see, when I made Montauk Chronicles, it was mainly me almost all of the time. So I was much like a ninja, just everywhere by myself like a shadow. Nobody ever really saw me, or especially when I was on the base or inside the tower. It was rare that anyone ever saw me doing anything because I was by myself. But when we made the Dark Files, there was a large crew with us, and we had to get permits for everything. We had to work through the town to shoot legally. I didn't have to do that when I was making my film. So through that process, there were days where we had scheduled a company called GeoView. These were geophysicists. They had advanced equipment that's not available to the layman. The normal person wouldn't show up with this equipment. And I think that for a while they felt very secure that the only way we could find what's beneath the ground is if we had our hands on this equipment. So we get there with GeoView, and then chaos is starting to ensue, in the terms of the head of Chamber of Commerce was preventing us from going to certain areas, giving us hell. And then out of the blue, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which I think this barely made it into the show, which I'm still puzzled about. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had a crew of, I think, maybe 60, 70 people on the ground. First time in 13 years, just so happened to be on the day we scheduled to shoot and examine the base. And they were everywhere, and they were drilling and taking soil samples. It just seemed like one big smoke screen to get us out of there. Now, you don't want to believe that. Try believing every excuse possible was given for us not to bring something called electric resistivity imagery, where you kind of hammer these little probes into the ground, and then it looks underneath the ground and gives you imagery of what might be beneath the ground in terms of any kind of man-made structure that contains metal. And so they wouldn't let us past the perimeter, the gate perimeter that surrounds the area where the tower is in the very center. The SAGE radar tower, the infamous SAGE radar tower that's in the middle of the grounds where Camp Hero is. And their excuse was this falling debris from the tower. But you could walk 200 yards from that fence towards the tower and still be in the safe zone. Nothing will fall on top of you because nothing is above that area whatsoever. They have greenskeepers there every day. They do all this stuff. Nobody's wearing hard hats. And they didn't want us to bring the equipment. So we put the equipment just outside of the fence. And what it saw was a vertical slice, just one vertical slice of what was beneath the ground, let's say from the surface of the crust, the ground itself, to, I would say, 25 feet from there was the top of this man-made structure that's not supposed to be there. And it was enormous. I think it had another maybe 30 feet wide and then another 25 feet down from the ceiling to the floor. This is just one vertical slice. So my suggestion is if anybody can get their hands on that type of technology again, which they can, but there's a huge problem with getting permission, so you can't do it legally as far as I can see, because I did an episode of Ancient Aliens, and they they wouldn't even give us the permit. They knew I was coming because you have to put names on the permit. And they knew the subject, obviously, that we were examining and why. And they, in a very unprofessional manner, evaded giving us permission to shoot that segment of that episode of Ancient Aliens. So
really,
they are, look, I can't say for sure, but everything is pointing towards that they are hiding something. And again, I'm not part of the camp of people who just believe anything that comes out of these gentlemen's mouth in regard to Alfred. Well, Alfred passed away, Preston's gone now, but anything that they've left behind, and especially Stuart Torello, I don't believe a lot of the things they say. I don't know what reason the lies were thrown out there, but some of the stuff is just so off the wall and unprovable. Okay, there's no evidence for most of the things they say. And if they really did want to prove this thing is true, they would have simply focused on the Montauk Boys program. That would have been the smart thing to do, because it would have put pressure on the government to reveal things. But instead, they threw out all this stuff about praying mantis people and different, like thousands of different creatures down there, and the most elaborate science fiction story you could ever come up with. And throw out the biggest, tallest tale instead of focusing on the crime. So if you focused on the crime all those years, it would have put pressure. But luckily, unfortunately, things like Holmesburg Prison and survivors of that, Tuskegee medical experiments, and MKUltra did come out over the years and did put pressure on the government to talk about these things and reveal it. They haven't revealed it fully, but they revealed it enough to acknowledge that these things happen, and it just seems like anything is possible at this point after all of that stuff was revealed.
When you look at the military base there, okay, and you look at everything that kind of happened at Camp Hero, tell us about what this base was set up for, because I think the majority of people out there, Christopher, believe it was set up to be some sort of structure that was basically for radar in case any enemy started coming over from the east, maybe detecting warships from communist type countries or any type of air invasion that was coming on. Nobody was really suspecting that there was projects such as MKUltra or even scientific experimentation on animals and crossbreeding going on.
Well, that didn't come until later. We inherited all of that information from the Nazis. So before that, it was a base. Before the radar experiments happened, it was a base to protect the eastern tip of the United States from, Nazi or Japanese attack. And it had 16-inch guns, those enormous cannons that were placed in bunkers that were defending that area. They had a couple of submarine bases, as I'm told. I have not seen any clear evidence of that yet, though. And even before that, if we go back to, let's say, the Spanish-American War, there was a structure over there, a house over there where Theodore Roosevelt brought the Rough Riders for quarantine. And before that, way back to the Revolutionary War, apparently there was a stockpile of weapons in that area. So it was always being used for something. And then Fort Hero became Camp Hero, and then they started bringing in the Sage radar experiments. And when that was rendered obsolete by satellite technology, we inherited scientists after the Nuremberg trials, Operation Paperclip. Allegedly, they went over to something called Brookhaven Labs. Brookhaven National Labs still exists, obviously. But according to the gentlemen that are telling the taller version of the tale, they say that they didn't check in through the town of Montauk in terms of going to work. They were brought to Brookhaven Labs, and then they went underneath Brookhaven Laboratories, where an underground train led to the underground base at Camp Hero. So as far as they claim, outside of Preston saying he repaired them, see, some of these stories contradict each other, like especially the one where, and again, I really feel like this was entirely fabricated for the book, or it was a hallucination, because it doesn't make a lick of sense. So you have Al Bielek Preston, Nichols, and Duncan Cameron all together in the final days of the Montauk Project, where this experiment opened up a rip in space and time and another dimension, and allowed this, through the imagination of Duncan Cameron, this creature to come through that they called Junior, right? And it was tearing up the base and doing all this horrible stuff. And so allegedly they stepped out of the base, went into town to room number 1 at the Memory Motel, conjured up this idea, and then went back there. Now, all of these gentlemen say that they were brought there against their will and their memories were wiped after the program. If a program like this happened, and I believe they have, throughout history or recent history, why on earth would a top secret program allow these guys who are in collusion to bring it down to go and leave the base, which is supposed to be top secret, and go hang out together and plan to take it down and then go back? It just doesn't make any sense. There was no security watching them, keeping them there, making sure they weren't going to do something like this. I don't know. You'd think that the military, especially at this high level of top secret clearance, would have more of a background checks and monitoring these guys, especially when they have such a responsibility with, this advanced technology that creates monsters from other dimensions. So to me, especially with Forbidden Planet being in existence, and that is the story of Forbidden Planet, the monster from the id, and even Preston in my interviews referenced Forbidden Planet, which is strange. I think that was made up. I think that whole story was made up. And I think these are gentlemen who, especially Preston, I believe was there in some capacity. Now, was he there as a scientist reprogramming people? I don't know. Or was he there as an independent contractor who was kind of a loner, who was there to repair certain technology and saw things that he shouldn't see out of the corner of his eye? Maybe that's the case. And I think later on he started going, and this has been proven and corroborated by witnesses, especially one of which we interviewed in the Dark Files, that he started a group called Psychotronic and had these meetings throughout the 80s and 90s. And that is where he met Al Bielek, Duncan Cameron, and eventually Stuart Swerdlow. And so a lot of the conversation that occurred between them was, you were at Montauk. I remember you from Montauk. Oh, yeah. And then all of a sudden they meet the publisher, and then the book is written, and all this really horrible, believable stuff is omitted and replaced with the more fantastic, science fiction elements that were thrown in. And it's an adventure story. And it ends with this big, climax, and Preston cut the power, and the monster disappears. And, come on, this is a movie. So that's how I felt.
Recently, Preston Nichols passed away. Explain to our fans who he was and his importance.
Preston was, no worries. You okay, man?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just, water went down the wrong tube.
Okay. All right. Well, Preston, according to Preston, was a gentleman who had an advanced knowledge of radio technology, and he was hired by Brookhaven Labs to be part of this new outcropping offshoot of Operation Paperclip, which was the Montauk Project. And that's where it began for him. Now there is talk that it's connected to the Philadelphia experiment. There's a connection to MKUltra, all of these other things, right? Even Operation Paperclip. But again, all of this stuff is kind of biased information on their part. And so for me to sit and repeat it as fact is wrong. I can only tell you my experience or what I've read in those places. I can't tell you what he was. I can tell you what he claims he was. So I just want to be very clear about that. Whereas other people will say, oh, no, he was this. It's like, well, you don't know that. You're only repeating something you read from his book or his interviews or his essays. You don't know that that happened. You weren't there. We have no evidence for it. So I have to be very careful about how I explain these things. But Preston claims he was there not only to repair, he was kind of like an all-around handyman, and also was there to reprogram or put programming in to the deep subconscious of the boys that were used in the experiments. These parts were, to me, were the most believable, where the boys were kidnapped off the street, runaway kids. Now, here's something that's it's similar in a lot of other government programs, is that they were looking for expendables. They were looking for either homeless, they were looking for orphans, they were looking for prisoners, and in this case, they were looking for runaway kids, street prostitutes, stuff like that. They wouldn't be missed. It was the 1970s. There was no internet. You could get away with getting these kids off the street and using them in these human experimentations. So that part is extremely believable to me. So Preston claims he was recruited by Brookhaven Labs to be part of this secret program for a variety of tasks, one of which was, once the boys were brought into the program, according to Preston, according to the other gentlemen involved, they were brutally beaten to the point where their personalities were fractured. And in that moment is where programming, so to speak, can be put deep into the subconscious. Later use would be to trigger them to be assassins. And then according to Alfred Bielek, also to heighten psychic abilities, to use them as government super soldiers and all sorts of different things. So it's like just hundreds of different reasons and tasks, Preston and the other gentleman laid claim to.
With his passing, is this kind of a passing of a legend, even though we got the information from him, or was there more that we could have got out of Preston as time went on if we had more time?
In the end, I don't know. I think if I had more time to spend with him and the right questions were asked, I always felt like I was on the verge of Preston displaying something for me that was really significant in terms of the technology. I was there and he had, endless shelves and rooms in his home in upstate New York in the mountains. And you see that place in an example in Montauk Chronicles and again in the Dark Files, a few other videos here and there. But Preston was building things, and he was, one could say these things didn't make sense. I heard that theory from people who claim they know electronics, and that they looked at his diagrams in the book and they were looking at his work from afar in the videos, and they're like, this is just, jibber jabber. This is a guy who's just sticking things together to make it look like they work. I did not see any evidence of anything extraordinary happening with his technology. And and again, not to disrespect Preston at all, because I felt there was something very genuine about him. I do feel like he witnessed something at Camp Hero. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so here's something really genuine about Preston, and I think very few people experienced with him. So he does kind of have this mad scientist demeanor about him. He is kind of funny, and he's kind of wacky and eccentric. And so this was in 2013 when I was interviewing him. He's a very sharp guy. He was a very sharp guy, very smart guy. And so he's watching me, and we were done with the interview. And he was always kind to me, by the way. So I never disrespect Preston. I'm only stating fact. And he never had a problem with that either. He never freaked out or, gave us a problem or anything for asking him hard questions. Just a real gentleman. So I was shooting him. We finished the interview, and I see him watching me, and he sees me place a lens cap and watches me shut the camera off. And then it was weird. It was like a completely different guy for a second, okay? He stood up straight, and he walked over, and it's almost like his voice changed, his demeanor changed a little bit, and seemed very sober and less erratic, and just said, Christopher, there's just some things I can't tell you on camera. And it was like I was talking to a different guy. And I'm like, okay. And I don't know. I felt that was a really genuine moment. I felt Preston, there was much more to Preston. But his health, just like Al in the final days, I think is deteriorating health and the lack of objective people coming to his home. But you see, it's a very particular combination because you have to be objective but also very respectful. It's a rare combination. So I think the lack of that and his health, tearing him apart in the end, prevented anybody from getting further info out of him. But we have stuff that he left behind. We have the stuff that I feel like that's the best interviews are the ones that I conducted with him, and I have a lot of it. I shot much more than you saw in the film. So eventually I'll put them out, the one from '06 and extended and uncut so everyone can see. Everyone can see every little bit of information he was trying to give me.
What about Al Bielek? I mean, this is a guy who talks about Montauk. He talks about how he was involved in the Philadelphia experiment, talks about the fact that he traveled forward in time by 1,000+ years. I mean, this is a guy whose life has been and story has been absolutely extraordinary. Could you fill our listeners in on what you think of Al?
Again, very hospitable man, very, very nice man. I spent 2 days around him. Showed him nothing but respect. I would never disrespect somebody like that. And but I didn't believe him at first. I was keeping an open mind. I did take into consideration that he was ill when I talked to him, but he had all his faculties and he was quite intelligent in his explanations of things. And at the time, a lot of things that he talked about I thought were even less believable. But then as time went on, it was strange. A little piece of news here on new technologies, a little piece of news there. I was like, Al told me about that 10 years ago. So I think it still remains to be seen. I'm still, as we go along, the things that Al talks about and that Al talked about and Preston talked about seem to be confirmed here and there. And even a lot of things that Swerdlow talked about, came to fruition. I just don't understand why so many lies were thrown in as well, because there's just some blatant lies mixed in with all of this stuff. So it's very confusing to me. And I don't know if, these guys kind of threw that in there as protection. Maybe they'd be left alone if they were just coming out with straight facts. I don't know. Like, this whole thing is so still a puzzle to me. And so the way to stay sane throughout all of this for me was to just focus on the most believable aspect. And I'm happy to talk about all of the other stuff that these guys claim happened there. But what I truly believe happened there, what we have evidence, we have some significant evidence to prove that there were human experimentations at a base, this base, Camp Hero, that they weren't supposed to occur. We were told for years that they never occurred there. There's not a chance. And I truly believe, with limited evidence, but we do have evidence that proves that there was something that happened there. Now, we just need to take that further if you want to prove it. Part of me is apprehensive about that because, once again, if you spend time trying to prove that a faction of the U.S. government in yet another area was kidnapping boys off the street and murdering them, some people don't want you to know about that. Unless they pass the buck and like Bill Clinton did in the 90s and say, well, that was them, not us, and we're very sorry for this. So I guess they could get away with it in that sense. But there's some really sinister stuff that happened at Montauk if it's proven. I think to the point where we have to completely reevaluate history and how things went down.
Outside of Al Bielek, is there any other type of similarities or connection between the Philadelphia experiment and what was happening at Montauk?
No, I can only tell you what Al tells you, okay? And you have to understand the details of what Al said. And again, it's no disrespect to him. We have to examine this objectively. If a nice, wonderful person tells me he's a unicorn, I'm not going to go along with this story that he's a unicorn just because he's a nice person. I'm going to say, well, he's not a unicorn. I really like him, but he's not a unicorn. So am I making sense? So Al said, again, everybody seems to go along and accept that Al Bielek was on the USS Eldridge. We have no evidence of that. And what Al told me and what Al seems to have told everybody else was that he was on the Eldridge, but he was in a completely different body, the body of Ed Cameron, different guy. And Al told me during the interview that I shot with him, and he was bleeding from the bridge of his nose and his arms. Looked like he was on a blood thinner medication, because I've seen that before. My grandma had that a while back, and I saw the same pattern of bleeding. But this Al had that, and he said, "Excuse me, but I've been age regressed 3 times, and it was far too many times." And then he elaborated and went further into the explanation of him being in the body of Ed Cameron during the Philadelphia experiment on the USS Eldridge. That's how that started. And that was incorporated into the Montauk Tales. Now, these guys get offended, especially the publisher and people like that. Like when you challenge this stuff, and it's like, hey, man, you can't get offended because we're asking some questions here. It's either you expect me just to go along with whatever you say, or I can't ask you some questions. So if you're telling me such an extraordinary tale, and then you have connections to this extraordinary tale, I'm interested in hearing it, but, give me some evidence. Now, on the other side of it, I believe in a lot of bizarre stuff, but it seems to be that I'm leaning more towards the bizarre stories from people that are credible. And when I say credible, they're people that have something to lose, like, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. He had this wonderful career as astrophysicist and scientist, and why is he coming back and talking about space aliens and contact and alien technology and all this stuff in his later years? I'd say a lot of that is true. And then we have like Gordon Cooper talking about time travel with Lee Spiegel from Huffington Post, and in private. And we have all these other people throughout history, these prominent figures that have made history, that have risked their lives and have done things. And those are the people I tend to listen to more than a guy just because he's elderly and has a knowledge of history, which any of us could acquire by simply getting a library card and spending time diligently devouring the information and retaining it. So I'm much more careful about repeating things and saying it's truth until I can say, yes, we have picture evidence, we have documents, and Al can recall things that would be impossible otherwise unless it was the truth about the USS Eldridge. He knows everything about it. Those elements were never in place. Al can't or couldn't tell you too many details about the situation outside of things maybe he elaborated upon in regard to legends that were already out there about the Philadelphia experiment. So the people that are out there just kind of it does a great disservice to us proving the Montauk Project being real, because all they're doing is further fortifying stuff we can't prove.
So was he at Montauk?
I'm sorry?
Was he at Montauk then?
I don't know. Do you know if he was at Montauk?
I don't know.
He says he was at Montauk.
Well, I figured you were kind of the expert here.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm giving you my expert opinion after over a decade. Yeah, I mean, if you want me to say, yes, he was at Montauk, I'll be lying right now because we don't have any evidence that he was there.
Right.
Like I just said and articulated in my best possible way, is that after this many years, I still can't tell you he was there. I won't. I know a lot of people will because he said so. But I want you to present to me the reason why they're saying that, because I haven't been able to find it, a good reason, other than that he said it and that they believe him.
Do Preston Nichols and Stuart Swerdlow kind of put him there at that time?
Yeah, I mean, they all agree that all of them were there. They agree with each other's stories. But again, these are all the guys that collaborated on the initial books. So we have to imagine that they had a meeting of the minds before these books were written and before these things were sold, that they were going to stick to the story. And I'm not saying they're wholeheartedly lying, because there's useful information from all of them. But there are plenty of people throughout history that have mixed lies with the truth for whatever reason they had. I just can't prove a lot of the things they're saying. And again, once you begin to say, oh yeah, of course, this guy went back in time and spent time at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Of course he did. And it's like, okay, I'm going to ask you, and again, I'm not any more of a skeptic than you should be, if you know what I mean. Because I've had my own odd experiences. I mean, things I just can't explain. It was so bizarre. I saw an apparition once, like I don't know what that was. I can't, we're trained by inherently to say, oh, it was a ghost, but I don't know what it was. And I'm just being honest. So now if I attach that story to this grandiose explanation of me being a victim of a big experiment, and that woman that came to see me was an agent of the experiment. She was actually an alien, and she was coming to visit me, and I was an experiment for 40 years, and blah, 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 blah. I can make up a story tonight, much better story than what was laid out, probably much more believable. I think we should take caution with these things. So there's one aspect of it where I love the mystery, but in the case of the Montauk Project, it's so confusing because whereas we have the cut and dry mysteries of, let's say, Travis Walton.
Right.
He's a really believable guy. He's a really good. To me, I met him like really, and I read his book. I think he is. I really believe he was on that craft. Okay, and that's a believable story. That's not attached to him being the savior of the universe, him having all these extraordinary powers that he cannot display for us. I mean, according to Swerdlow, he can walk through walls, he can move things with his mind, he was blind for 30 years, he has absolutely no proof of any of this, and it just seems like the lies keep building and building and getting bigger and bigger and bigger for a small group of people, by the way, because there is no mass group of people that believe him. But my question is, I have no, there's no reason to challenge these people outside of, I'm somebody who I think that holds sacred the truth. And I also hold mysteries sacred. But these mysteries are a bit more sinister because some of the people involved are interacting with people, taking their money and touching them too, saying, I'm a healer and now my hands are on you. I can deprogram you sexually. Yeah. So all of this stuff is really sinister. And I think eventually, if these guys live to see it, might even pay for the crimes, because they're crimes, in my opinion.
Chris, I'm going to have to get you to hold on right there. We are late for a break on Spaced Out Radio. Christopher Garetano is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. You can find his documentary. All you got to do is go online. It's the Montauk Chronicles. That's what we're talking about tonight on the Mighty SOR. We'll be back with more after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4 Cop, On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Wachowski's Strange Days.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
There's news, and there's the encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Thiemer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, Chris Cogswell and Chris George Zuger are back for Reality Paranormal. We get into the scientific side of everything. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. We welcome back everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. All of our archives, you can catch them for free. All you got to do is go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Hypnagogia. Hypnagogia is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Tonight we are talking with movie director and producer and the president and creator of White Phosphorus Pictures, LLC, Christopher Garetano. We're talking about Montauk and his Montauk Chronicles documentary that actually won a nice prize in New York City back in 2015. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you very much.
When you look at the entire Montauk project, what do you personally think happened there?
It could have been a variety of things over the 13 years. What I believe happened there was that deep beneath the ground, underneath the Camp Hero facility, which is the facade, and it was also a working facility for a variety of reasons, but I think it was more, in the later years, it was more of a front just to keep activity topside. There were a variety of experiments that happened beneath the ground. I think the most brutal ones were beneath the ground. But above ground, there was a structure now, has since been removed, but we have, because of a gentleman named Brian Minnick, we were lucky enough to have pictures and video of a structure that once stood. And you'll see some of this in the dark files if you take a look. Within that structure, there were a variety of rooms. Each room was professionally painted a different deliberate pattern. And so this is in line with past LSD drug experiments, and that I truly believe, based off of that evidence, and based off of, in combination with the testimonies of other people outside of this initial group, like a gentleman who uses the alias James Bruce, and a variety of other people, that I believe between the years 1971 and 1983, beneath the ground and somewhat above the ground, there were human experiments, mind control experiments, being conducted at Camp Hero. And this is a secret government program not unlike the Holmesburg prison experiments and a variety of MK experiments, including MKULTRA. So that is what I believe. I believe that people were brought there. I believe that they, in the same tradition as the other experiments that we were able to prove, that there were drug experiments, they were injected with heavy amounts of hallucinogens, and that it was for the purpose of creating a Manchurian-type assassin. Now, it was developed and it was experimented throughout the 70s, early 80s, perhaps even into the 90s, and then I believe it began its application. And I can't say this for sure. Now, this is going into the territory of speculation, and it's dangerous territory, but keep an open mind to this. Think about the rash of nonstop shootings that occurred from, and increasingly got worse from Columbine on, and probably hit a high water mark, its peak maybe last year, this year. And I think these type of experiments, one way or another, were put into application it had some, if not more than, significant influence on what we saw and what we've experienced. This is not just a rash of copycats. This is not just a rash of, angry little kids. This is something strange and connected to a lot of these things, and that's what I believe.
These people, these homeless people, these homeless children that they were allegedly taking back there, do we know how many of these kids they actually took?
According to the gentleman that I interviewed, they were talking about in the numbers of hundreds of thousands, perhaps well over 100,000, between 1971 and 1983. Now, initially you hear that number and you're like, that's impossible. But then if we look at the data and, the true data of missing people, during those years, it's astonishing. And it definitely confirms that could be possible. So in a 13-year period, that many people being brought through with very few survivors. So the next question would be, well, what did they do with the bodies? I did ask this question in Montauk Chronicles and the Dark Files. So according to Stuart Spurlow, there was a crematorium underneath the ground, and that's how they dispose it, or they would drop them into the ocean or bury them. Here's another thing that we found when we were making the Dark Files. And again, this is not hard evidence, but a possibility, and I'm quite curious and should be investigated further. So there was an area of Camp Hero where we were certainly restricted from, I think. And it was looked at with geophysical equipment. And according to the geophysicists, they said it was in line with past mass grave sites, that what they found scientifically, scientific evidence that they had and that they could present to you, was that there was decaying organic material in several areas in this little area of Camp Hero, which could have been anything, but the gentleman who runs GeoView told me that could be bodies that are underneath the ground. Now, could it be the bodies of the boys? Yeah. Could it be a potter's field for some other era? Yeah. But that's what he believes it was. So that's another thing that could be further investigated. If those, I think if we had proper scientific equipment and true investigators over a number of months to a year or more on those grounds, and they were permitted to look around, you're going to find a lot of stuff. That's what I truly believe.
How do we know it was around 100,000 people? Is that all speculation? Because
speculation.
100,000 people, somebody would notice.
You'd think that. You would think that. How many missing people disappeared off the face of the earth between 1971 and 1976? Do you know?
I have no
idea. Once
idea.
you find those numbers, it's going to blow your mind. Let's just say the United States alone. How many missing children? How many people went missing between the years 1971 and 76?
I have no idea. What I do know is that...
I think it goes into the millions. It's ridiculous.
What I do know is that, according to FBI statistics that were provided to Butch Witkowski out of UFO Cop in Pennsylvania, that approximately 1.3 million people go missing annually. And after all the alphabet groups and police agencies whittle it down, there's about 65,000 a year that they cannot account for.
Correct. So imagine at a time where we didn't have the internet, that people could disappear much easier, and then a longer number of years. I would say 100,000 people is believable, no? Between a 13-year period, 1971, 1983, So it's possible. Most people would say it's not, but I believe that part is possible. But if you look at these other programs that were using human subjects, they weren't using that amount. And again, there are quite a few embellishments on the part of these gentlemen that I spoke to. With all due respect, they were just embellishing on a lot of stuff. I think for the book, and then they had to stick to the stories, because otherwise they would later look like big liars. But again, I think it was pretty. I think that first book they should have been more careful about it. They didn't have the best foresight as to where this was going to go, for sure.
So with the people who were missing, were they looking for specifics? Were they looking for just mostly men? Were they looking for women? And if with women, how did the tests differ from those on men?
According to Alfred and Preston, they were looking for boys. There was something very particular about the DNA of younger men, and they were also looking for very particular DNA, a certain history about the actual person's DNA. So, and these people were susceptible to the psychic renderings and the mind control. And those people they needed to find would be a DNA match to these things. Now, according to Al and Preston and Duncan, they said that not only were there mind control experiments, and not only were there experiments to heighten psychic abilities, but there were also, derived from alien technology, a biorhythmic, time, interstellar, and interdimensional travel program that they were experimenting with. This, I believe, at some point somebody must have tried to develop, and I believe this because of a more credible witness named Gordon Cooper, who was serious about partaking in a time travel experiment. And according to science and according to a lot of brilliant minds believe it to be possible. However, they could be under top secret clearance. This is just the way I'm thinking, is that this technology could exist. Who knows? This technology might be in development for a certain amount of years, but they're not exactly allowed to tell us, But I can't say, just as I said before, that this is dogma. But they certainly were conducting time travel experiments in the Camp Hero, and there certainly was a menagerie of aliens down there. And I can't tell you that. I can tell you that these guys told me that, but I'm not going to tell you that it's true.
Right. No, and you have to be objective on it too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that makes complete sense.
I'm looking for evidence.
Yeah. But I'm more interested right now in the aspect of these missing people, these boys that they were looking for DNA. If the boys didn't have that right DNA, why not just set them back on the street? Why hold them forever, kill them, do whatever they did to these lost souls?
I don't know. Again, this could be another thing that was fabricated, reasoning. I personally think they didn't give a darn about DNA. I personally think that they were looking for expendable people. If you look at some of these other programs, it's exactly how they were behaving. So that's why they would go to orphanages, and that's why they would go to prisons where it wasn't just boys, it was older men. And they were using them in a variety of experiments because they could get them for cheap, and these guys were expendable. Nobody would miss them. This is how they thought, And so runaway boys who are prostitutes on the street are also expendable. It was never fully explained to me as to how they found the kids with the DNA. Maybe, these guys have a variety of elaborate explanations for everything. So who knows, maybe some of the handlers that were out seeking the kids could just look into you and know your DNA. It doesn't make any sense to me, but especially in 1971, right? We weren't there yet, as far as I know. So I think that that could be another thing that was thrown in there. And we have to take that into consideration. It's not I know a lot of people, I love mysteries, and there's so many incredible mysteries out there, some of which I'll be exploring in my new show, that we have just the best stories and incredible people who have a lot to lose if they were telling this bizarre tale. And we have evidence and things to talk about. And the Montauk Project is scary to me, because it has a different, at its nucleus, a different reevaluation of history and about our current world. The scary part is the current social political climate reflects some of the elements in these programs. There's a huge wave of paranoia and conspiratorial ideas about everything. There's a huge wave of distrust and division. And a lot of these ideas of the government experiments, and now, as we all know, are in the mainstream. When I started making this movie, they were not yet. And now they are very much so. And I believe they'll continue to be. And so during that process, we will see the revelation, the uncovering of a lot of these things to be true as we have along the way. And, it's just so different than, it is so different than all of the other mysteries that I'm exploring. It completely stands on its own as this odd, sinister thing. It's almost like, I don't know, this is a strange analogy, but the aliens in the story, the book written by Whitley Strieber, Communion, they are using the facade of the gray alien to cover something much more sinister underneath. And that's how I feel about the Montauk Project. It has this candy-coated facade of a science fiction tale, but underneath it is this filthy, dirty, sinister, dark, evil, malevolent thing that's happening that could be very real. And that's how I see this thing. It's very different than anything else I'm exploring.
With the time travel aspect of everything, you had to go down so many different roads with this entire story in order to figure out what was going on. What did you have to learn about time travel? And do you believe that they were conducting experimentation using some of these people?
I think it's possible, but for us to get to the more elaborate experimentation, we have to prove first that kids were being kidnapped. And so that's what I'm doing. This is something that's going to take time. So I can't jump over to the alien program or the time travel program or the monster from the other dimension or Stuart Swerdlow hanging out with Jesus because I haven't gotten to the proof of the kids being kidnapped yet. However, I think we found some significant evidence that will lead to proof. So that's where I stand. And so you're asking questions that I can answer and say, I can tell you what they said, but I can't tell you that time travel occurred there because I don't know, and neither does anyone else, because they have no evidence of it. They're just repeating something that someone else said. And so in this case, that what I personally found, and I didn't discover this on the internet, we found this firsthand, going to these locations, speaking to these people, spending a decade, going through all the archives in the library and reading stuff online and reading all the books, speaking to eyewitnesses and alleged eyewitnesses and people that lived on the base and everything you could think of in this true investigation, is that at the end of the day, what I found was that I think we found several pieces of evidence that there was a human experimentation at Camp Hero. Once we prove that, that's when all of these major King Kong-sized doors will open up for other possibilities. And I would certainly be interested in seeing what other technologies were developed down there, if any. But right now, I can only repeat what was written or what was said by gentlemen who don't have any evidence of what they're talking about. They just have their word. Now, it is your freedom to believe what they're saying. It is also my own to be more objective throughout the process.
I understand that, but I mean, for most of the experiences that we have and people have, there is no definitive proof. All we have is the voice. All we have is the story. And how do you get around that?
Okay, so so in Gordon Cooper's case, this is a man who was a Right Stuff astronaut who did these extraordinary things that we know of, that we have full-on evidence of. So later in his life, he's talking to Lee Spiegel from Huffington Post in private and is telling him seriously, deadpan serious, about a time travel experiment, that he's willing to take that risk. This is a man who's taken risks with his life in the past Okay, and in regard to the gentleman involved in the Montauk Project, we have absolutely no evidence whatsoever that these guys ever hopped in a ship, that they studied astrophysics, that they did any of these other things officially, have any degrees in these things. You know, like Spookles calling himself a doctor. He has no PhD. You know, all these other things that are happening with these guys in comparison to someone like Gordon Cooper or an everyman, right, like Travis Walton, who is an interesting guy. But everybody involved in that situation submitted to polygraph tests 3 times over, an independent polygraph, and they passed. So that didn't happen with the guys in the Montauk Project. So that's how I differentiate, and that's how I make my judgment call. I'm not being harsh. I'm being honest. And, you know, harsh would be like some cynics that I've met that wouldn't believe a damn thing and would only go with follow the crowd as soon as the thing's proven. That's not me. I have been following this thing for over a decade, being very fair with all of the things said to me, but I have witnessed some very shaky explanations that just don't hold water, and I would be a fool just to say they're true. So, and there are other credible people, like I said, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and other people that I feel have something to lose, like even in the, you know, something as elaborate as the Wisconsin werewolf stories, right? There are genuine people with jobs and lives and families that have not profited off of telling the tale that they had seen something that corroborates with all of them that they described this thing equally and uniformly amongst themselves at different times, you know, throughout different decades, you know, the Shackleman story and all that stuff. That's a much more interesting story to me because it's this isolated thing. They all saw this creature. I think it's very believable, right? And they have really nothing to gain outside of just saying, hey, man, I saw this thing, and they describe it to me. The Montauk tale is, I am this very special individual who went through many different bodies, and I am also telekinetic, psychic, and I am an alien, and I met aliens, and I'm part of a super government program, and I saved the world, and it just keeps going and going and going. And then these guys also claim that, you know, they're fully aware in great detail all of their past lives and different planets and different galaxies, and we're going into super science fiction territory now. And George Lucas, you know, like hung out with him, even though we have no record of, you know, Mr. Nichols working with Mr. Lucas on the sound for Star Wars. So it's like, these are stories. And, you know, the reason why we have solid records of history, even when it comes to paranormal mysteries, is that somebody did the due diligence and the effort, put the effort in to kind of support these things. Now, the reason why I put so much effort in is because I do want to believe. I think we live in a very bizarre place that the mysteries are abound, and we should spend more time exploring our abilities, our psychic abilities. We should spend more time reevaluating certain odd happenings in history and taking a look at them seriously as opposed to, you know, for entertainment purposes only. And so that's my perspective. And I'm fine with anybody else that dives right into the mystic and says all of this stuff is true without even showing me any possible tangible evidence or even some kind of display of your abilities if you're a super mystic or anything. That's all fine. I just think it's damaging to the plan, and the plan is to explore these things, and you know, science and mystery go hand in hand, and science is just one way to examine a mystery. So I feel like it's a useful tool, but it's not dogma. And so for you to explore a mystery with science, you have to be open to it, right? If you're a total skeptic, you wouldn't even bother. You would say, this is a waste of money. I don't believe this. Well, that's not my approach. I do believe it. I just feel like we need to get that geophysical equipment back at Montauk and further explore. I had a skeptic with me on the Dark Files, Steve Volk, very skeptical guy. He probably wouldn't waste another minute with the geophysical equipment, even after he saw the evidence, you know, or wouldn't bother or wouldn't care. But myself, I would go back, and I would spend years there with it if I had the permission to do so. because I want to believe, and I want to uncover things, and I want to learn about them.
Do you feel that there will be a time when whatever happened there actually comes out? Or is it so heinous, the rumors so heinous that there is just no way this could ever become public knowledge?
Oh, I totally believe it'll come out. I just think it's a matter of time. Because of the direction we're going in, and even certain people in politics are open to these things. So if they're open to these things, and then, you know, there's some rational thinkers that are out there saying, hey, maybe this stuff is happening because of our evidence of the Holmesburg prison experiment and MKUltra and all of that actually did happen, 100% did happen, that we are open to other possibilities. But I think with something like this, which is so different than any other paranormal mystery out there, any other UFO sighting or any other anything, it's so different because it has this horrible crime at its core, whereas those other stories do not have this horrible crime, you know, at its nucleus. This is a different thing. I get it. You know, I've been so immersed in it for so long. It's caused a lot of anxiety and paranoia, and it's attached to so many things. It really affected my life, personal life, everything. So I'm moving away from it a little bit. I'm always happy to help anybody else that wants to continue the investigation. They can always check with me. I'm happy to, you know, I left as much information as possible in the 2 programs that I was involved in, you know, even the Ancient Aliens episode, everything I could possibly contribute. But I think someone else needs to go for this now. I've spent a lot of time on this, a lot of time. And I think it's time that people take what we worked really hard to establish and go forward. Otherwise, all you're going to do is now try and make history out of a bunch of guys telling a story without any evidence. You know, like even stories of war and stories of history and, like I said, astronauts and even some ghost stories. Like we have, you know, corroborative evidence, like in the case of, let's say, the Black Hope haunting in Crosby, Texas in the late 70s, early 80s. There are several families that all saw things at that place, okay? It was built over an old slave cemetery. And people really did die, and people really did get sick. And these people actually did try and sue the development collectively. You know, like there's no, and you look through this, you know, there's no other reason. Something must have been going on there, you know? And these people were really disturbed from the situation. They have details and, you know, that kind of paranormal thing is more exciting to me and less dangerous. We're playing with fire with the Montauk Project because someone has to answer for, if this is true, for mass murder and kidnapping and a lot of other things. And nobody wants to be responsible for that. So it's a scary thing.
Is there anybody out there, or have you been tipped off to anyone who maybe wouldn't speak on camera, wouldn't speak on the record, but had told you that they were there and it was not pretty?
Yeah, a couple of people that claim they were there, but here's something even better. So a project like this needed funding. According to Al, it was a lost Nazi train full of gold. Another kind of spectacular movie type thing. Could have been in Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know. But what I believe, and I have a witness who just was too afraid to step forward because this particular person was the only person appointed as secretary in this major chemical company who oversaw documents, who oversaw things that corroborates Preston Nichols. See, this is another reason why Preston has more credibility than me, and I believe he's had some exposure to the truth for sure, because in this situation, because this person told me, and this person is legit. They gave me names and dates and places and actually proved to me that they work for this company, and the reason why they can't is because they have a pension, and they'll lose they'll lose that pension if they were to talk about these things. But this person oversaw documents, everything from experimental alloys being sent to Camp Hero and Brookhaven labs, people's names that Preston only had mentioned that are on these documents, and also money, because it had to be funded. Now, this particular company had funded other military efforts in the past, so that makes sense. So the Nazi train full of gold sounds like Raiders of the Lost Ark, European version ripoff movie. And but this story sounds believable to me. This story makes sense because these programs were funded by these companies. So that's the person I would love to speak to. I tried to get them in Montauk Chronicles. I'm sorry, this was after Montauk Chronicles, but as we were moving into the Dark Files, and we were very close to talking to this person, even incognito. We would have disguised their voice and face, but it boiled down to, even then, this was the only person involved, and that outside of a man who died, that knew of these documents at this particular location. So they would have boiled it down and they would have found this person out for sure.
One of the things that I'm always curious about, and whether it's Montauk, whether it's Area 51, or any strange place that's out there, is the amount of people who are involved. Not just the victims, but the people who work there on a daily basis. They may not know exactly what they're working on, but the fact that they are there, they see the strict atmosphere, the militarized atmosphere, it comes in the tens of thousands of people over time. Are you surprised that nobody from that base, from the military or even civilian employees, has spoken out? Because that's one of the confusing aspects I have about Area 51 with Bob Lazar, is that there hasn't been anybody else.
Initially, you would say yes. I'm shocked that we haven't heard from more people. But let's say you were a government, just like the person I was just telling you about. They won't come out and speak publicly about it. And this was a person who was just kind of caught in the middle of seeing some documents. Okay, so now think about somebody working in the facility and taking part in murders. I would say a good majority of those people are accessories. They knew it, intelligent enough to know that they are accessories if this ever comes out. They must have known that this is a crime because it was being done illegally, or at least illegally to the American people and people of the world. And so the only reason why I would truly believe that they're not coming out in droves is because they don't want to be associated with it. Because wouldn't there be like a Nuremberg-style trial involved in this? Tribunals, like these people they're criminals, all of them. And that's, Preston got, if you notice on camera in Montauk Chronicles, he gets very upset at one point. You can see it really bothers him. There's something very genuine about Preston when you're talking about the boys program. And again, something organic and very different, because you would think the right thing to say would be, well, this was against my will and I would never go back and do this again. The end of Montauk Chronicles, Preston says, I would go back and do it all over again. And then kind of snaps at the camera and me when it's really bothering him that he may have been involved in murders. And it's such a genuine thing. When it happened, I felt it was like this was a really genuine reaction. Because why would you even tell the tale of kids being murdered, not realizing that at some point someone might say, you're an accessory to murder? You could have just said, kill me. I won't kill these kids. I won't partake in anything you want me to partake in. You're murdering children. I'm not going to do this. And some people would say that. I'd rather die right now. But these guys didn't. And, you have to take that into consideration. This is so different than any other paranormal mystery. It's a real heavy thing when you start to think about it. And I think a lot of people are just comfortable talking about the aliens and the monster and the technology and the time travel. And probably that's why it was omitted from the original manual. And I think Peter Moon said that. But still, it changes the game when we now are incorporating murder and rape and kidnapping and all sorts of stuff into this.
Was this strictly a military project, or was there alphabet groups like the CIA involved in this as well?
Al said the Navy, deep factions of the Navy were involved in this. And this being an offshoot of Paperclip. What year was the CIA created?
Oh, goodness. I'm way too Canadian for that answer.
Well, I'm thinking, was it around, it was post-World War II, right?
1947. September 18th, 1947.
Right. And what year did we incorporate the Nazi soldiers into our vernacular? Like, we spared them, we brought them over. 45. So, yeah, perhaps the CIA was involved. But talking to Barry Eisler, who was on the show with me on the Dark Files, he was ex-CIA. And he talked about some strange things that he saw during training, but didn't seem to agree with a lot of the things that Preston and Stuart were talking about on the show. But that doesn't mean that Barry had clearance to see everything that was being developed, and the CIA, they aren't scientists. It's not their job. It's a completely different group of people. So, these were military scientists. I don't know if the CIA was involved. The CIA might have been involved in the application, whereas these things are developed. I guess MKUltra the CIA was involved in, but these things are being developed and then it's applied. I don't know. I can't say for sure because we haven't been able to prove it. I see so much speculation on the internet.
Outside of speculation, what has been proven?
What has been proven? The Holmesburg prison experiment, MKUltra, the Tuskegee medical experiments. What's been proven is that the government had done these illegal things and even passed the buck, because then you had a front where Bill Clinton comes out and says, well, this was very un-American and this was done by rogue groups of the government. Rogue groups of the government? Don't you have to get clearance before you spend money on things, especially a program where you're kidnapping people and drugging them? So it doesn't make sense to me. And so all of that stuff has been proven. And government programs have been proven. And secret bases have been proven. We know they exist, right? Strange technologies and credible eyewitnesses of strange craft, especially when people are on certain orbit missions and jet missions and jet tests. They have seen unidentified flying objects. These guys are credible guys. They have video, they have pictures. So, and then there was a series of soft disclosures recently in major news. So, yeah, all that stuff has been proven. Mind control experiments have been proven. But have they been proven 100% at Camp Hero? Not yet. I feel like we found the beginning of evidence. I feel like people need to go further with this. And what I would recommend is that you take another group like GeoView or that same geophysical equipment and scour more of the base physically and start there. Because once you start to prove that there is truly an underground structure, because what we found was a vertical slice of an enormous man-made structure with iron ore in it. And that thing wasn't supposed to be there. This wasn't a tunnel, and this wasn't a water tank or anything like that. This was a room. And I guarantee you're going to start to find that alleged underground base, series of rooms, levels that go down. You'll find a version of that with that equipment. And once that's found, then you can say, well, government, you said that this didn't exist. Well, it does exist. So what are you going to tell me about this place now? And I think that's where we need to start. Then you put pressure on the government to reveal, and they'll probably do what they did in the 90s, where they grazed over the human mind control experiments and said that they were chemical, medical, radiation experiments, and then keep all that stuff in like this tertiary, obscure box that's hidden in the explanation. Bill Clinton was only talking about the Tuskegee medical experiments. The gentleman happened to have dark skin, so he was using that and exploiting that idea as like some kind of human rights thing. But any human being experimented on is bad. And I could see the ruse that was being created at that moment to say, that this was just an unjust thing to these particular group of gentlemen. But the government didn't discriminate color. They experimented all kinds of people, everybody. And they never seemed to admit fully what they did wrong. Because then again, they can pass the buck and say, well, it wasn't us. It was the previous group of people. So I think if you find enough evidence there was an underground base underneath Camp Hero, that the pressure should be on to find out exactly what happened there.
Has anybody described...
That's not my job to do.
Sorry, Chris. Has anybody described what Camp Hero is like back then?
You mean the underground base?
The underground base, the entire facility.
Yeah.
Because looking at pictures now, it looks run down. It looks, like it's a closed base, which technically it is. But there are other people out there who believe that there is still some sort of work going on there.
Here's an interesting thing. So recently, because a lot of people have watched the programs I've done and the movie I made, and so I get emails every now and then, and of people visiting the base and sending pictures. There's something new that's there. There's a sign that says it's under video surveillance. I haven't been there since, but I used to install video surveillance for businesses and offices and stuff. So it's pretty easy to spot where they might be. They're usually up high on poles. So there's a sign there for sure, but I haven't seen any cameras. My question is, so why now? Well, I know why, but it's good to question them and say, well, you're putting up all this surveillance now. Why? Why did the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers show up? And people in the past described the topside base as it's a standard military base. There's nothing overly cosmetic about it. There's living facilities. I've been on the inside of the tower. You could imagine how it was when it was in good shape. And we have pictures of that. There are pictures I have access to tons of photos from the interior of the tower throughout the years when it was in operation. It's normal military equipment, just in better condition than it is now. Better coat of paint on the wall and stuff like that. The underground facility was described by the gentleman that I spoke to in Montauk Chronicles and in the Dark Files as cold, uncosmetic. There were walls with water dripping down. I portrayed it the best I could in the movie. The way it was portrayed, they said it was just like that. Preston Nichols says it was just like that. Dark hallways, rooms here and there, not cosmetic, not cosmetically appealing at all. There were chips on the walls and stuff like that. It wasn't a pretty place.
No, I can honestly imagine that. I mean, it almost sounds like a place of absolute nightmare and horror movie.
Very much.
So for the people,
yeah, that's how I imagined it. The way you see it in the pictures.
Yeah, I mean, I think of a lot of scary, lonely, beige hallways. Man, a lot of beige hallways, and that's never any good, man. If you got the beige hallways going.
No, certainly not. Or gray.
No, absolutely. The base now, it is shut down, correct? Technically.
Yeah, but now it's kind of like an exterior museum because you have these upright, markers of history. So it'll tell you what the 16-inch guns were. It'll give you a brief history about the SAGE radar tower, semi-automatic ground environment radar tower, when it was, how it was applied, when it was built. So it's weird because it's like it has these picnic grounds and it's open to the public. This is the one base, for the most part, that you're allowed to visit. You can get pretty darn close to, whereas Area 51 and all these other places, you can't. You can see it from a distance with binoculars and have security chase you away. You're allowed to go to Camp Hero, and with a proper license, you can camp out. You can have a picnic. You can have a cookout. You can visit all the historical markers. So it's different. You can hike around the base. You can jog. These things aren't available elsewhere.
So weird. It is so weird with everything that's kind of gone on there. Let's get into the MKUltra, because there's a lot of people out there who've maybe heard of MKUltra but don't really know what it is.
Right. Well, the MKUltra experiments, again, I studied the Montauk Project, so it wasn't exactly my forte. But, you know, it was a CIA mind control program. And once again, very similar to Montauk, where there were human subjects being experimented on, a variety of torture, a variety of drugs. This is all, you know, tantamount to all the stuff that led and spilled over into, I think, several other projects, including the Holmesburg prison experiment. So the MKUltra projects were very much, like I said, tantamount to Holmesburg prison or some of the aspects of Montauk later on. And they were designed to disrupt and ultimately control the mind. They were military projects to start. I think they experimented on some soldiers. Then that moved over to, citizens. But I think MKUltra was just one of many. You know, it was one of many programs that were similar.
Do you think that it was, you know, considering the prolific role it played at Montauk with the head games and everything that was going on with a lot of people there, do you think that this experimentation, although not your forte, was something that was under complete guidance of the CIA or any other alphabet agency?
It was 100%, MKUltra was 100% under guidance of the CIA. I don't know if Montauk was. You know, we know that it was, you know, it was implemented in the early 50s. There were LSD experiments. But, you know, I don't know what group may have transferred it over. The Holmesburg prison experiments were outcroppings of this as well. So I think there were several other groups, kind of rogue groups within the government that were using these experiments too. Obviously, they all work together. But yeah, I mean, if you want to do a show on MKUltra, just let's give me some time to study it, and I'll come back with a lot of facts for you.
Oh,
I'll
no
go
worries.
talk to witnesses, and
I'll
spend the next 10 years talking to people and examining things and interviewing, and then I'll tell you about my experiences.
What about the alien aspect? We got about 4 minutes before we got to go to break. The alien aspect of everything, because on your cover of the Montauk Chronicles, you have a gray holding his pointer finger up to his mouth, kind of going shh.
Right. That idea came to my head. That was painted by Trevor Cook, but the idea was mine. And it was exactly what I was explaining to you earlier. It was the idea that the gray alien's putting its finger to its mouth to hush the true happenings behind the facade. And so what I felt over the years was that this fantasy story, and I'm not saying gray aliens are a fantasy, but in this case they might be, this fantasy story of monsters and aliens and time travel and all this other stuff was the mask, was the reason why this gray alien is telling you to shush, is because the true thing is much more sinister than anything you could imagine. It's a story of murder and kidnapping and mind control and an application that affects you and I to this moment. So the things that were being developed in these mind control experiments, I feel if you watch the news and you watch a lot of stuff on the internet and you're susceptible to advertising and most of us are, you have a cell phone, certain things that were developed in these, everything from MKUltra, from the CIA to whatever groups were conducting stuff like Montauk, to, I guess, CIA groups that were dealing with Holmesburg prison. All of these experiments culminate with the effect it's having on us. And that's one thing I believe that Al Bielek and Preston Nichols were correct on, is that these experiments, however isolated they were during the time of using human subjects, once applied, was meant to eventually put on the mass population in one way or another. And just think for a moment. Now, if you ingest hours of news every day, That is your only outlet to the world. That is manipulated. All of it is manipulated one way or another, especially in this divisive political climate. You know, some of these stations are clearly on one side of the right or the left, and they are telling you exactly what to think. Not only that, about politics, but about what's happening in the world. It's either a barrage of destruction, of heartbreaking tragedy, with very little positivity sprinkled in, fear, or social political division. And they're telling you what to think. Now, if that's not mind control, I don't know what is. But somewhere along the line, this type of thing had to be experimented with. And I think some of the stuff you're seeing and we're looking back on in these programs like MKUltra are being used on us one way or another. The reason why the CIA was developing stuff like this is for interrogation purposes, you know, or for secret agents, or for how to manipulate the mind in their espionage purposes. But there's other stuff. And this is why I say I don't know if it was the CIA, because these experiments ultimately are being used for other things. So that's just my learned explanation after 10 years of reading and experiencing this stuff.
Well, I am going to hit you up more about the alien side of everything when we come back from the break. Christopher Garetano is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio, and we are talking the Montauk Chronicles. This is a documentary that was well put together by Christopher and his excellent team behind him filming this great movie. Won a 2015 Philip K. Dick Film Festival Award in New York City for Best Documentary Prize. And it's the strange and weird that keeps Christopher going. We'll be back with more Spaced Out Radio and the third hour after this.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month, where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
From the mile-high state of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all in your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Chris Cogswell and Chris George Zuger join us for another edition of Reality Paranormal. We get into the science of everything ghostly. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. We say hello to everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. Also, all of our archives are free for you to listen to at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, Hypnagogia. Hypnagogia is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. For the final time tonight, we introduce our guest, Christopher Garetano. He is the creator of the Montauk Chronicles. He's also working on a Bigfoot feature right now. And you know me, I love me some Bigfoot. I really do. Chris, welcome back.
Thank you.
Before we get into the Bigfoot talk, which will take us to the bottom of the hour, aliens. I love me some aliens as well. And right before the break, I was looking at your cover of the Montauk Chronicles, which shows an alien gray. Do you think there were aliens involved in any of the experimentation that was going on at Montauk?
I think it's a possibility, but once again, not to burst anybody's parade, but I need to find out if the human experimentation happened first. And I've heard all the stories of all the different extraterrestrials that may have been down there by the gentlemen who claim they were there. But do I think they were there? I have to be objective with this particular. I do believe in extraterrestrial intelligence. I do believe they have visited Earth. I do believe people have seen their craft. I do believe that people have interacted with them. But in this particular case, I don't know, and I want to, I think it's smart because of all the thing that's happening at its core, this crime, and the idea of a government experiment happening there, which is, to me, the thing we should focus on first, has to be proven before we move on to the alien stuff in this case. That's what I feel.
Right. Let's move over to Bigfoot here, because you are now gathering evidence and documentation on Bigfoot, Sasquatch as it's known up here in the north. What's your opinion of this creature? Are we working with a creature that is supernatural? Are we working with a creature that is a long-lost relative of the apes here in North America? What's your thoughts?
After many years of reading and experiencing and enjoying the mystery, reading about the mystery of all of this, and definitely in recent years, re-examining everything, as a man in his early 40s, with the same love that I had when I was as a kid for this, is that, number one, I don't know why. If you have any knowledge of human origins, evolution, different species, anthropology, then I don't know why you find it so hard to believe, coupled with credible witnesses over hundreds of years from all over the world, sightings all over of very versions of this species from different cultures representing them well before hundreds of years. Why would you have an issue with believing that this is highly possible? You can look at fascinating creatures that we have evidence and specimens of, everything from silverback gorilla, mountain gorilla, to an octopus, and you don't think anything of it. But then someone says there's a bipedal, intelligent, hominid walking around, a wild man, so to speak, right? Walking around in the wilderness, varied places throughout the United States and throughout the world. To me, it's not far-fetched. I think it's a given. What I do think, though, is the mistake that people are making is that they're saying that the Sasquatch or the Bigfoot are much like a deer or animal or a bear consciousness, which I don't think that's the case. I think it's much more closer to human in that sense, where they're smaller in number, they're aware of that they're an endangered species, and that they're their breeding, inherent breeding nature is not the same as a deer. Whereas they're kind of unaware, they're breeding fast, they're multiplying, and we have to get the population down, whether by hunting or smashing into them with a truck or whatever. They overpopulate in certain areas. That's not going to happen with the Sasquatch because they know they don't fit in. And so my perspective, in part, in my picture, is this historical look over the years of something that I think interacted more with people, and then, in terms of indigenous tribes, and then when the more advanced cultures came in and war began and territorial genocide began and all this stuff, these things, were seeing this happen, realized there was not a chance of them fitting in anywhere in this, and they were going to be, taken out too. And so they retreated and became more elusive, less in number, specifically, intentionally, keeping their populations down and hiding. And that's, to me, also is not far-fetched to believe. But throughout time, in hunting expeditions, camping expeditions, walk in the woods, whatever, we've interacted with them here and there. And there's some very credible people that have seen these things. So I want to bring that, and it's also such a wonderful mystery, too. And I want to take that enchantment that I felt and that wonder and that fear of this wild, conscious thing that was close to human but also animal that lives in the forest, and just bring that core idea into the atmosphere of a motion picture, which I think is lacking in almost everything that's been done on the subject. And so I'm going back to the purest well. The books that were written, the Patterson Murphy book, even later on, Jeffrey Meldrum's analysis, some of it, and William Munn's book, When Roger Met Patty, and the Ape Canyon story, and the Roosevelt story. Theodore Roosevelt wrote his memoirs, The Wilderness Hunter, and within the Cowboy Land chapter in that book, there is a story about a man that Roosevelt encountered named Bauman. They were on a buffalo hunt. And there was something so sincere about this frontiersman that he talked about an experience he had many years earlier where a friend of his was killed. And it's a really spooky story by something he describes as Bigfoot. And this is Theodore Roosevelt wrote this in his memoirs, and he, in terms of how we talk about credible witness and their demeanor, he watched Bauman tell him this story, realized this guy was so sincere, and wrote this really spooky story in his memoirs, Roosevelt. So I'm going to portray that in my movie as part of one of the several stories that are in the picture. And then there's this historical thread that leads us through from basically the creation of life on Earth, the birth of cellular life and the evolution of creatures to, and that happens like in the first 50 minutes, but then to the stories of this creature that became continuously more elusive as time went on. And that's, in short, because I don't want to give too many of my ideas away, what I'm going to make.
When you sit there and you look at this creature and the thousands of reports that have come through time in regards to people seeing it, do you think that we are dealing with a creature that is some sort of hominid that's already here? Or do you go with more of the First Nations and American Indian sense that there is something supernatural about this creature?
I think this is kind of maybe an esoteric explanation, but I think there's something supernatural about a lot of things that we take for granted because we live within the artifice. This is a creature that doesn't live within the artifice at all. It's 100% real. It sees the artifice from a distance, whether it be war, whether it be technology, flying over, whatever. It's all from a distance. So its experience within the forest is heightened to a point that we don't know. And maybe the native tribes knew better. And so they were more in touch with the mystic. Because of that, we have nothing but distractions. Artificial distractions surround us, around our homes, technology constantly. I mean, most people are basically their cell phones right now. So what I want to do is take you back to the forest and take you back to that place where the natives may have thought it was mystic. And I'm open to that as a meditation for sure. And we'll feel that in the movie. I want to totally transport you with this. Imagine, if you will, I'm raising the bar 100% on at least motion pictures made on the subject. This will be the best one. Someone might do better one day, but this will be the best one because, it's like 2001: A Space Odyssey did something completely different with science fiction films. I want to do that with a Bigfoot movie, and I'm going to. So I'll take you somewhere else.
The sightings that are around North America are so eerily similar, although the creature tends to differ in size, especially in the south with the beast of Boggy Creek, and then you get into the Florida skunk ape comparatively to the size of the Sasquatch that are here in British Columbia, right south until you hit the northern part of California. Do you think
environment, of course, dictates it does it with humans too. It dictates the size and shape and, environment, whatever, indigenous food is in the area, the way the seasons change. Yeah. I'm actually I live right adjacent to one of the nature preserves where they say the skunk ape is. And I've heard some weird things out here. I'm like out here in the jungle. So
me too.
Here in Florida.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. We have found a couple of prints in this area. And one was about 18, 19 inches by about 8 or 9 inches, and the other one was about 14 and a half inches by about 6 inches.
We have to talk, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
My Bigfoot movie, the one particularly that I was just talking about, is not exactly a documentary, but I am going to make, and I have been making a documentary that's going to accompany that film in some format. So I'd love to talk to you about it.
Oh, we can always talk. I'm always up for some good Bigfoot talk. Never go wrong with that. You just never go wrong with some Bigfoot talk. That is for sure, man. That is totally for sure.
My job is to get you back in the proper atmosphere. I'm a filmmaker and a storyteller, so I want to get us back into that. Of course, bringing the best information, but bring you atmospherically there, bring you there, because I think we lost it. I don't know how many seasons of Finding Bigfoot were there. I'm just curious.
Oh, I got to tell you, I didn't watch a single episode.
There's a reason why, though, because it was completely void of the atmosphere that made us all, including guys like Jeffrey Meldrum, want to explore this subject and revel in it and love it. And then it's extracted and it becomes like this. It felt like a halftime, replay, instant replay on a ball game. It never felt like we were looking for Sasquatch ever, and nothing was ever found because, you would think a professionally elusive creature that's a lot smarter than anybody's giving it credit would see these guys coming a million miles away. So I want to bring it back to the whole mystery of the thing. I think in terms of tonality, like the original In Search of Nimoy episode nailed the tone, but now you want to expand on that and do something completely different. Like one of my first stops is Iceland. I'm shooting the origin of species period for, a section of the film in Iceland. So you can imagine the landscapes I'm going to get for the movie. It's going to be crazy. And then, of course, I'm going many other places, Pacific Northwest, Canada. It's going to be an epic film, man. There might be a 3-hour cut of this movie. So,
well, there's definitely enough information for it. That's for sure. Definitely enough information for it and places to see. And, you start going into a lot of the other aspects of it. Like we were talking just a couple of weeks ago here, where up here in British Columbia, there's a lot of logging crews that will not discuss Sasquatch whatsoever because if they talked about how their machinery had rocks thrown at it, or if they talked about the footprints or the evidence that was in their fields of forestry where they were going to go cut down a bunch of trees, well, then the environmentalists and, the Sasquatch groups and so on and so forth will come on in there and say, we have a creature here. We need to figure out what this creature is, shut down the logging. Well, that could be worth millions.
And see, this is in line with everything I'm doing in the picture. And you know, I have a very organic process of making movies. Like I start with a rigid structure, but I keep doors open. And I thank you for telling me that story and that piece of information, because you just opened up another door for me to write more for the film. And so I want to talk to you further about this. I know we have limited time tonight, but I'd love to, you know, maybe bring you in as a consultant or just rap with you about it, you know, and tell me what you know.
My phone line's always open, man. My phone line is always open. Now, I mean, I'm not an expert or anything like that, but quite far from it, to be honest. But, you know, I do dabble. I would consider myself an amateur.
You're sharing information. Yeah, no, but who is an expert? Who could be an expert on Bigfoot? I mean, I've read a lot of books too. You know, I've gone out in the field. I experienced something when I didn't see one, but you know, I was there with a gentleman named Joe Stewart, who I like a lot, good guy, and we were out in northern Michigan, and specifically there for, you know, a place where he said he had a few sightings, and just a, you know, an intense experience. We were hearing owl calls, but they were strange, and he told me it was the Sasquatch that was making them. And I didn't see anything, and I've heard owl calls all my life, you know, living near the forest and now in the jungle. I hear owls every night here. And it's like, you know, it sounded strange. It sounded like something was making them. Now, it was deer season. It was really cold. It was in the middle of nowhere. And I know the hunters were back at the cabin areas because we were all staying in the same, you know, these cabins were built in the 30s, and everybody was back at the cabins. Nobody was out at night. And we were out there for a while, and these calls were coming. They just sounded really weird, and that's the best I can lend. It was a thrilling experience just to think that maybe this sound was coming out of one of the Sasquatch. So that was my personal experience with it.
Well, before I had my sighting and encounter with two of them, I had a couple of buddies who were fishing a lake up on top of a mountain by the Harrison Hot Springs here in British Columbia, which is a hotbed for Bigfoot activity. And here they are belly boating. Now, this lake is probably, I'm going to say, a mile in diameter. So it's a very tiny lake at the top of a mountain crevasse. And they were fishing it. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of the lake, as they're sitting there in their belly boats, they hear the roar that lasted about 15, 20 seconds.
Wow.
They said they were so freaked out. I didn't go fishing there for a while.
And see, that is exactly what got me interested in the first place. That idea of being out in the middle of nowhere and trying to absorb nature. And you're aware of what might be there. Bear, deer, you know, mountain lion, big cats, birds of prey. And then you hear something that is not supposed to be there. Something that's anomalous and strange, and it sends a shiver up your spine. That is what I'm trying to capture with this picture.
Oh, for sure. But there's a lot of people. See, I think Bigfoot kind of goes in this area where it has pockets of very violent creatures. Mount St. Helens being one of them. Boggy Creek, another one. Right? But I think the Sasquatch up here is more docile, always watching, almost like a protector of the forest.
It makes so much sense because that's how human environments work as well.
Yeah. No, exactly. I'll tell you one story from up here that I think you would enjoy. There's a gentleman, a good friend, my neighbor Tony, his buddy was driving out to one of the lakes one night to a camping party. And it's about an hour out of town. And all of a sudden, it's a very thin 2-lane road, very windy along the lake. And all of a sudden, they saw this thing come out of the ditch. And the next thing he knows, as he's about to pass this thing, this big hand goes whap right on his windshield, shattering his windshield. He hammers the brakes. The girlfriend is so freaked out, she slides from underneath her seatbelt into the foot compartment of the passenger seat and will not get out. He's got his brakes hammered, and in his rear view mirror with the lights, he sees this giant 8-foot Bigfoot all of a sudden walk across the road and walk up this mountainside. How do you explain that to the insurance company?
Well, tell them it was a bear, because everybody else will.
Yeah, no kidding.
Tell them it was Bigfoot. Yeah, the insurance won't work. They're going to think you're on drugs. But, there's a little bit of, if we consider some of the Terence McKenna theories, like the heightened consciousness of man, the whole idea that during the evolutionary process or certain stages, man may have been ingesting, naturally growing psilocybin mushrooms or psychedelic plants. And so consider the fact that even these creatures may have done that too, because you talk about an elevated consciousness or something mystical about them, just like tribal people were doing the same thing. Perhaps these things were ingesting those plants too. And, you have to open your mind to it, and I'm sure yours is, but some people are so caught up in pop culture that they're like, oh, Bigfoot was doing mushrooms. It's like, yeah. Why is it so far-fetched?
I hear you.
So.
I hear you. Well, the one thing about the wilderness of British Columbia is you never know what you're going to run into. You really don't. And it's a little ridiculous at times because, like, give you an example. On the weekend, my friend and I, we were driving around, and he was hunting, and he's hunting for animals. I'm looking for anything Bigfoot. And we're on this logging road on top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere, like 30 kilometers from any type of civilization. And we come across this big pile of grizzly bear dung that is bright orange, like pumpkin orange, and seeds all in it. It was, I actually stopped my vehicle, and I'm like, what the hell is this?
Wow.
Like I thought it was like cans of like Alpo dog food that had changed color or something because they were rotten. It was disgusting, but cool at the same time. But I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you never know where you're going to find anything interesting out in the forest. And that goes straight across North America.
Right. And we look back at the Patterson film, and it's such a strange series of coincidences and odd synergies. So you have a guy who's making a Bigfoot documentary, and then, Bigfoot walks by.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just find that impossible to believe, especially since, Patterson was making a Bigfoot documentary. He was building a suit for it. So the gentleman who comes out and says, I was the guy in the suit, which we all know that wasn't the thing that walked by on that infamous film, that silly suit that was being made for that other gentleman. But if you read William Munns's book, When Roger Met Patty, you get the perfect perspective of how real that is. Some people have kind of just thrown their hands up and said, okay, we can't go any further with this. But the analysis, the painstaking analysis of William Munns, and just so many reasons to believe that, yes, that was just a crazy coincidence. Like, it just really did happen, that he really did capture that on film. And that is real. That's our evidence right there. It's just so hard to prove. But through that analysis, I would say a thinking man or woman would, certainly be convinced by the end of it. I am. So, and again, you look at certain case books that go back. I know one case book I was reading that they were saying the first recorded sighting was in upstate New York. But they're all over, I mean, outside, I'm not saying, after folklore and everything. But yeah, I mean, they're all over the world. So I just don't find it hard to believe. So that's where I moved from. Like, anyone says, do you believe it's real? Yeah, of course I believe it's real. I wouldn't even be exploring the subject.
My friend, we got about 60 seconds left with you tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell everybody where they can find your information and your movies.
Well, currently you can go to MontaukChronicles.com. You can find Montauk Chronicles in many formats, physical media and digital. And you can also on Amazon, I believe, the Dark Files, the History Channel special that I made for history, is available. It's called The Dark Files. It's a follow-up, kind of a sequel to Montauk Chronicles. And currently I'm working on my own television series for a well-known network that I cannot announce yet, but you will see it next year. And get ready, because it's my dream show. So
awesome. We'll talk Bigfoot very soon, my friend.
All right. Thank you very much.
Take care, Chris.
Take care.
Christopher Garetano on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Coming up next, we have Olaf Phillips with The Encounter and Paranoia Magazine.
This is the winter of our lives. We come to play the final scene. The curtains closing in the darkness we expose what lies beneath.
It is that time once again in the night where we talk about the weird, the strange, the WTF, as we bring you The Encounter, the Spaced Out Radio newsroom, which can be found at spacedoutradio.com. Click on the news banner, and boom, there you have our news from the illustrious reporters that we have, including Captain Shirk, writing up a storm. So we bring in Olaf Phillips from The Encounter and Paranoia Magazine. Mr. Olaf Phillips, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I am doing good. Talked about the Montauk Chronicles with Christopher Garetano tonight. Do you buy the whole Montauk story?
I do. I think it's a very interesting story. I don't know that I buy all of it, but I definitely buy parts of it.
What about like Al Bielek?
You know, to me, it's just crazy enough to be true. I mean, he spins a hell of a yarn, you know, that he was basically, if I remember correctly, he was reinserted into a new body, and I mean, it just goes nuts from there. But his story was fairly consistent. That's an argument for Bob Lazar too, that he always told the same story, right?
See, I believe Bob Lazar much more than I do Al Bielek.
Same here. But what I definitely do believe is that I believe that they were messing around with the destroyer. And I think that whether it jumped locations and the people being fused into the hull and a lot of the other details, I don't know about, but I'm sure that they were messing with that destroyer, and I'm sure that their objective was some sort of an invisibility cloak. Whether the effects of it were what Bielek and others have described, I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever know, but you know, it's an interesting story, and I try to keep an open mind. So, you know, I definitely enjoy it as a story, and I think that it's like everything else in this world. I think there's probably some truth to it, right? But maybe not all of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do believe in the government experimentation. They need to do it somewhere.
Sure.
And when you have nobody to the south and to the east of you, you're doing okay. You only have to worry about two different directions. I mean, that place, that base was in a perfect location.
It was. And you know, I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea that it jumped locations. You know, I mean, I've heard, well, Nick Redfern has an interesting book about the Collins Elite, which was a group of people financed, and Redfern's a very, very good researcher. And, you know, apparently it was a team of people that was paid by the U.S. government, and they were trying to open gateways to hell and do all this weird interdimensional stuff. And, you know, I mean, if they're trying to do that, right, then it's not beyond the pale that they're trying to hook up Tesla coils and stuff on the ship to try to get it to dematerialize. You know, and I think and also the idea that they lost control of it. It did something that they didn't expect. You know, I think there's probably some truth in that too. It's just the part about Bielek and traveling through time and all that other stuff that I'm not so sure about. You know, It's an interesting story, though.
What do you
But I
go
don't
to,
know how
like,
you-
year 2884 or something like that?
That was the guy yesterday who passed the polygraph, 2887, I think.
But where did Bielek go in the future?
He went, I don't remember, but it wasn't that far.
I thought it was.
I have to reread the Montauk stuff.
Anyways.
I've been finding these crazy articles, so I haven't really thought about Montauk.
That's what we bring you on here for the encounter. Give us story number 1, my friend.
Story number 1, just in time for Halloween, comes from WGNO, which is an ABC affiliate. It's in Louisiana. Monroe man tells cops that ghost planted meth in his home.
Of course, because ghosts like to get high, too.
Just in time for Halloween, a Louisiana man told cops that a ghost had planted meth on him. After police found methamphetamine in plain view on his nightstand of his home, 59-year-old Michael Attenberry claimed that a ghost had placed the drugs in his house. The officers were responding to a reported stabbing, Attenberry believing he had been stabbed in the head with an axe, police confirming that was not accurate. I quote, was not accurate. He allegedly cursed a... Go ahead.
I got to find this out. Hold on. He said he had an axe wound to his head, and there was nothing there. How high was this guy?
Well, it gets better, but he thought the axe was still in his head. He allegedly cursed at cops and people who were obviously not there. After cops did a sweep of his home for his safety and located the drugs, the suspect claimed that either a ghost or intruder had placed the meth on him and were exiting the home through a nearby window.
This guy's been watching too much Paranormal State.
I like that show. Okay.
well, hold on a second here. How high do you have to be in order to blame a ghost for the meth in your house?
I'm not worried about him blaming the ghost for the meth in his house. How high do you have to be to believe that you have an axe sticking in your head when it's not there?
That is a bad trip, my friend. That is a very, very bad trip.
Yeah, I mean, that's on the order of magnitude of like some crocodile or something. I mean, he had to be really, really, really super high on meth to think that. I mean, and then to try to say, well, a ghost put it there. Because you know what? He probably really believed a ghost put it there. I wouldn't deny that. That's a weird one, right?
Oh, that is totally strange, man. Totally strange. And I'm not sure I fully understand it. I don't want to be that guy. So they busted him for meth. How much meth did they find in the house? Now I'm curious.
It doesn't even say. It doesn't say, but I would assume that it was not massive because it was on his side table. But it was enough that he was obviously totally cooked on meth.
Oh, the poor guy. Poor guy.
Oh, and the picture, the mugshot of him is classic. I mean, he looks like a meth user with an axe, with a pretend axe in his head. It's not there. That's a good one.
That is a good one. That is a good
I
one.
was
Okay.
like, that's too good to be true.
Oh, sometimes that's the beauty of it. Usually we get those stories out of Florida. The fact that it's not in Florida is kind of surprising to me. But let's move on to story number 2.
Okay, this is for everybody out there who's been trying to sight Planet X. Because, it's in the sky and it's coming to get us. This is USA Today. Searching for Planet X, scientists discover distant goblin object billions of miles beyond Pluto. The object has an orbit that hints at an even further out super-Earth or larger Planet X that could be lurking out there. The findings were announced Tuesday by the International Astronomical Union's Minor Planet Center. The object, which researchers have nicknamed the Goblin, was discovered as part of astronomy's hunt for unknown dwarf planets and Planet X, aka Planet 9, an as yet undiscovered world that could have a mass about 10 times the size of Earth.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah. So to paraphrase the rest of this, apparently this 200-mile wide planetoid that they call the Goblin, it's out by the Oort cloud, which is at the very edge of the solar system. It's where comets come from. And its orbit seems to indicate that there is a larger mass out beyond it, which is affecting its orbit. But this thing would have to be super huge, super dense, way out there. That's why they keep looking for it.
Is there
But
life
there may
there?
be a...
Do we know if there's life on there?
Well, we haven't found it, so, there could be.
You know what I don't like about stories like this? And I'm going to be serious here for a second. Olaf, I don't like stories like this because of the fact that now my Facebook is going to get inundated with CGI videos of planets spinning in our blue sky and people writing notes and saying, look what's happening in the middle of Wisconsin right now. Of course, the mainstream media isn't going to cover this. You know what I'm saying? We all saw them. And now they're going to make their rounds again. And now I'm going to have to delete more people off my Facebook for posting fake news. I don't like it.
But I'll tell you why it's important. This is why it's important, is because of that very reason. That when they're talking about Planet X, they're talking about something that's beyond the Oort cloud. That this thing is so far out there that the sun almost looks like another star. That it is so out there that it could not possibly have the kind of eccentric orbit that it's supposed to have to go into the whole, Anunnaki thing. That if Planet X is real, and there are a bunch of scientists that really do believe that it's real because of the orbital mechanics of how things work, there's no scientific way that it could be what the people posting those videos believe it is.
Oh, I know. It is ridiculous. Honestly, it bugs me. It bugs me. And I hate that fake news stuff.
And as a researcher, I don't really have a problem with the idea of the Anunnaki or ancient aliens or anything like that. I think there's actually maybe some truth to it. The problem I have is that, like all things in the conspiracy world, right, that it has, or UFOs, Bigfoot, cryptids, whatever, there has to be some factual science behind it. That you can't argue that this, there's this planet that comes around and it almost bumps into us and then it goes back out, and 10,000 years later it's going to come back. Because if that was the case, having a planet pass that close to us would rip our atmosphere away. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't necessarily people living on that planet way the hell out there, but the chances are highly unlikely. So it forces you to take a look back at the whole Anunnaki thing and ancient aliens thing and go, okay, what are we really dealing with here? And you start to get some very interesting answers. But you have to look at it factually in order to be prompted to get that, to get there.
I hear you. I don't buy it. Look, I'm not saying that there isn't something out there. I'm not saying that whatsoever. All I am saying is that I do not buy the fact that, if it's billions of miles of light years away, this thing is
billions of miles.
Yeah, this thing's, what's it going to take to get to Earth? Billion years?
A lot.
Billion years? 2 billion years? I don't think we've got anything to worry about with it.
That's actually the interesting one. The next one that I had was about, remember when that asteroid came like hauling ass in and shot around the sun, and they caught it on its way out? Yeah. And there were a whole lot of, and even scientists, even now, cannot figure out what it was. And there were a lot of bona fide scientists who were like, maybe that is an alien probe, right? Well, apparently they went backwards, and some guys from NASA, the ESA, and Max Planck went backwards, and they've kind of calculated its trajectory, And apparently this thing, Oumuamua, it was that long cigar-shaped thing, asteroid. Apparently it's been out there for several million years, from what they can tell. And the speed was so high that it actually broke a lot of the science that we believe about acceleration of these kinds of objects. They believe that it's actually slingshotted around 4 different stars to get here.
Wow.
Yeah. And that makes you wonder. That makes you wonder, because to achieve the speed that this thing was going, it had to keep slingshotting around stars. Right? And even if it was traveling for 1 million years, which is what they say, the idea that it every so often it would have to slingshot itself around to maintain the speed would almost indicate that something may have been intelligently pushing it, guiding it.
Could very well
because
be.
It keeps. Yeah, and I think that's the flip side. That's where you start. I put that in here for that reason. That's where you start to see, okay, there's science, and the science works.
Unbelievable.
And there are a lot of scientists that still believe that thing could potentially be an alien ship of some sort. It's not beyond the pale. They scanned the hell out of it and couldn't find anything. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right?
All right, buddy, let's move on to the next one.
All right. Let me see. What else do I have here? Well, I'll give you a choice. 17 Magazine does 11 mind-blowing celebrity ghost stories, or did you see the bright light over southern New Mexico?
No.
Which one you want?
Let's go light over New Mexico.
Okay, so there was a weird light that shot over New Mexico, and it lit up the switchboards, UFOs everywhere, right? It turned out that there was a SpaceX launch from Vandenberg,
right,
where they launched I think it was an Argentinian communication satellite. Well, the launch could actually be seen from pretty much the entire western and southwestern states. So if you saw a weird light in the sky from pretty much anywhere in the west, it was the SpaceX. And you saw it going up, and you saw it come back down because it successfully landed back at Vandenberg.
Oh, very nice. Very
Yeah.
nice. I'd like to see one of those nighttime launches. That would be kind of cool.
Well, there's some videos of this one, and it's squirrely. And what's interesting is it's very easily identified as being a SpaceX launch, right? But when you watch the videos, and some of them are in HD, and it's very beautiful and impressive, but you start to look at some of these launches, or look at some of these videos, and you start to think to yourself, all these times when people have reported back in these UFO sightings, and they have these weird kind of like triangular shaped diffusion of clouds and all this stuff, and they film it, it's like they're rockets. And the more times SpaceX does this, and you actually see it at night, and the way that it looks, and the halo effect of it and everything, you start to realize that more and more of these things that people have reported as UFOs or crazy circles or other stuff, they're probably rockets. And it really makes you think, how many rockets are they actually launching? Because what this video shows is actually been filmed many, many times from many, many different parts of the world. So they're launching quite a few rockets. But why?
Maybe they just want to put up a bunch of secret satellites that we don't know about.
It's possible. I mean, just not too long ago, there was a whole rash of UFO sightings, and and everybody was like, oh, there's like all these mass sightings, and it turns out that the Air Force came back and said, no, those aren't UFOs. We launched some sort of a spacecraft. But that's all they would say. And when they give you a kind of curt answer like that, you almost believe it, But it's like they're launching stuff on a regular interval now, and they're doing it in places where it can be seen. And so it really makes you wonder.
It totally does. Totally
That's a
does.
lot of payloads. Yeah.
We got time for one more before we got to get to the thought of the Dave.
The thought of the Dave. I can't wait. Okay, 11 celebrity ghost sightings that will blow your mind from 17 magazine.
All right. We got
Selena
about a minute.
Gomez. Oh, I don't know if I can do it that fast.
Give me the top three.
Selena Gomez, the Back to You singer, is a firm believer in ghosts. On The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon back in 2015, she said that she even uses an app on her phone to check if there are any spirits around her, particularly while traveling on tour. I believe the spirits can tap into technology, she told Jimmy, which seemed pretty skeptical. Selena told him, look, I was in a venue and it was actually said, people in my life by name. So creepy. Miley Cyrus had a haunted apartment in London that her and her sister, her mom, and her fiance all had experiences. I was just sitting there, and maybe I'm crazy, but I could have sworn I could see this little boy sitting there on the sink kicking his feet.
Weird.
Got time for another one?
One more.
Ariana Grande.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we'd be so stupid to believe that there are only people here. She explained that she had a ghost demon experience while in Kansas City. The Sweetener singer wanted to visit Stull Cemetery, which is known as one of the 7 gates to hell on earth. But she started to feel sick and smell sulfur, the sign of a demon, according to her. I rolled down the window before we left and said, we apologize. We didn't mean to disrupt your peace. The scariest part, when she tried to send a pic of the cemetery to her manager the next day, her phone said, this file can't be sent. It's 666 megabytes.
Oh, weird. Good time to get to the thought of the Dave.
Thought of the Dave.
Oh, yeah. Got the music playing. Little Cuterebra by Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL. Always rocking us in the background. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we post a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, and then we read your responses on the air. Why? Because we absolutely love the idea of your participation in the show. So today's Thought of the Dave is as follows. What do you think happened during the Philadelphia experiment? Let's get to your comments, shall we? Let's go to Twitter. WGAFA says, maybe dimension change? Who knows? But it's really scary stuff, that Philadelphia doings. Yes. Yes, indeed it is. Daniel, I think that the ship with its entire complement began to breach the fabric of space-time, but only for a moment. When the ship returned to its original space-time, it was out of sync, causing the bizarre anomalies. If true, it shows just how ignorant we are of all the complexity in it all. James.
Good point.
I think time paradox. I believe they slipped through a wormhole. Interesting. Les.
Possible.
At hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I lean towards the thought that something weird did happen, though the stories are all over the place. I do think time and space are bendable, even by us humans. However, if you don't know how to play with your toys properly, yeah, he just left it there. Let's go over to Facebook, shall we?
What else do you say to that?
Exactly.
True.
Tim says, not really sure. An experiment involving electricity, magnetics could go wrong any sort of way. Not to the extent of what's been reported with the crew members embedded into the ship, though. That's very intriguing. Brian states, they were testing the ability to use electromagnetically to create a cloaking device that's hiding the craft from sight. However, in the equation used for said test, there are variables or factors that, if go unchecked, result in a possible time and space rip being open. This is exactly what took place during the experiment, and no, it had nothing to do with cheesesteaks.
Now I'm hungry.
You know, I once had a Philly cheesesteak in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Okay.
I got told that it was sacrilegious. Sacrilegious.
Was it good?
It was fantastic. It was fantastic.
I had a good
don't regret-
Reuben in Portland.
I don't regret the decision at all.
You can't. You just got to keep
Exactly.
going forward. Yes.
Yes, sir. Tessa says there's a reason Tesla backed out of this experiment, too risky as the end result showed. David, still wondering if there actually was a Philadelphia experiment, but if there was, it might well have had something to do with the history of what Richard Dolan calls the breakaway civilization, which relates to covert interaction between humans and aliens and the hidden technologies being developed behind the scenes. Chuck states, well, you're not a fan of that one, Olaf?
No, I don't think the breakaway civilization has anything to do with aliens. I think it's all human derived.
Me too. Me too. Yeah. Chuck states, the only thing for sure is something went very, very wrong. I don't think we'll ever know for sure. The question I have is, did it scare them enough to run away from that technology? Which I doubt. The government is never smart enough to put matches down when they get burnt. Or how much farther have they come in all of these years? Lance states, warp drive was invented that day. Nice. Nice. Grant? Oh, Grant, I'm going to have to edit this one. The event took place indeed, but not necessarily at the place and under the project name we are given. The experiment was meant to cloak, but it was used for reverse-engineered technology that it didn't fully comprehend. The tech was more based on changing vibrational frequency of matter using conflicting, fluctuating EM fields. I had to edit that.
It would explain it.
Could. Penman.
Yeah, I mean, if you're...
Go ahead.
I'll tell you what. Well, it would explain why the people were in the deck, because if you change the vibration of at the atomic level, it makes it more porous and you could pass through it. So
we've never really used the word porous on this show, my friend. You're all, look at that. 2 days in, you're already expanding the dictionary and the thesaurus of Spaced Out Radio.
Thesaurus? Thesaurus.
Thesaurus.
Whatever. You're Canadian. It's okay.
You're American. Are we gonna do this accent thing here? Is this what it gets into in the last little bit of the show?
You know, I would argue to you that the English that the Canadians speak is probably closer to the English that is spoken in England than what we speak.
Well, of course. You guys slang everything. Like my pet peeve.
We do.
Squatch. God, I hate that. I hate squatch as much as I hate soccer and cotton balls.
I love soccer.
Well, everybody's got their flaw.
Now, Q-tips. Good for you.
I like Q-tips. Cotton balls, styrofoam. Ugh. Get rid of
Styrofoam's the worst.
Oh, it is. It completely is. Okay, you're back in my good books now. Mr. Olav, tell us where we can find The Encounter and Paranoia Magazine.
Well, you can find Paranoia Magazine at paranoiamagazine.com.
And The Encounter at spacedoutradio.com. Click on the news section and our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Appreciate you coming on. We'll talk to you tomorrow night, Mr. O.
You got it.
All right. Big thanks to Christopher Garetano for coming on tonight, talking about the Montauk Chronicles and the weird and strangeness of that Long Island Air Force Base. Tomorrow night on the program, we have Chris Cogswell, Chris George Zuger, Reality Paranormal at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everyone listening in at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be on this lovely, lovely night. And a big thank you to everybody on Spreaker for being just awesome in the chat room. Thanks to everybody on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. Your snark was magnificent. And the Veterans Club, the SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook, along with the chat room and Rev Radio. Thanks for sharing the show, telling your friends, and doing your part to make us bigger and better every single night. Because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you at 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Good night.